Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It's season 2, episode 46. Austin, the Steelers have finished up their bye week. It's Colts week. It's the start of the second half of the season. Things are looking good for the Steelers as the Ravens and Bengals lost over the bye week. So the Steelers are in prime position to take on a team that they have beaten quite a bit over the last few years. And not just beaten, but beaten pretty handily in the Indianapolis Colts. Do you think there's going to be another blowout on Sunday?
I think so. I think it's going to be an easy blowout.
Well, we'll get into that game in a little bit, but first we have some NFL news to get to. First and foremost, I don't even think we talked about it last week, but it was the fight between Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Green. We didn't even talk about Mike Evans either.
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about either of that, and that Mike Evans thing is almost more important.
Why don't we talk about the A.J. Green thing first, and then we'll get to the Mike Evans hit. So A.J. Green and Jalen Ramsey brawl there. They both get tossed from the game. A.J. Green fined, I believe it was $42,000. No suspension coming. What are your thoughts on this?
Honestly, it was really surprising. I think even, Antonio Brown was surprised. I don't think I've ever seen A.J. Green so, Bengal-like, so to speak. And A.J. Green is probably my second favorite wide receiver in the league, after Antonio Brown. So I was just shocked. And it wasn't like him. I've never seen him ever get pissed off. I don't think I've ever seen A.J. Green that mad. Apparently, Jalen Ramsey was really under his skin that day. So I honestly gave him the benefit of the doubt that Jalen Ramsey was just really digging in there. So it's really his first offense. So that's why he didn't get suspended for it. So that's my thoughts.
Who could blame him when, he's probably frustrated as all hell playing on the Bengals for his entire career. He's never won a playoff game. It's never been his fault that they haven't won. He's been their best player pretty much every year since he was drafted.
Oh, no doubt. He's probably the best player on the Bengals.
He might be the best receiver, assuming things finish up the way they have been. He might be the best receiver that's never won a playoff game.
That's true. Honestly, that might be true. We'd have to go back and see history, but
yeah, I'm not sure what that list would be like, but I'd have to think he's the best. I can't think of a dynamic receiver such as himself playing with. Let's be honest. When Andy Dalton was at his best, he was early on in 2015 an early MVP candidate. So I'd say at the very least he was playing at a Pro Bowl level at one point, but for most of his career he's been an average quarterback. And I think A.J. Green has made him a much better player. They haven't had really any other good receivers. And to your point, he really has never looked demonstrative at all or has done anything really. I can't remember any sort of penalties. The worst thing I can remember A.J. Green doing over the course of his career was punting a football after scoring a long touchdown against the Steelers into the stands, which should be a penalty, or at least it should have been at the time. Beyond that, I can't think of any flagrant penalties, 15-yarders, stuff like that. I can't think of anything. He's been a role model type of player. And, Jalen Ramsey got under his skin and he overreacted for sure. But I can understand why he didn't get a suspension. But it's also, I think it speaks to maybe how frustrated he is, not only at that point in the game, but with the team itself. I think he's pretty tired of the lack of success they've had.
It's been a while since the Bengals won a playoff game, and never since A.J. Green's been there. They've been to the playoffs, just they've never won one. I don't know when A.J. Green's deal is done, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to be a Bengal once his deal is over.
I'm looking that up right now, as a matter of fact, because I'm interested. He was signed to an extension in February of 2015, so you'd have to think he'll be under contract for a little while. Furthermore, he is now 29 years old, so I believe he was 2 years old the last time the Bengals won a playoff game.
Wow. Yeah, that's been a really long time.
the USSR existed at that point when the Bengals last won a playoff game. All right, at the end of this year, Green will have 2 years left on his deal. He signed a 4-year extension at that point. So he would be a free agent at the 2020 season where he will be 32. So he could theoretically leave.
Yeah, he might. If the Bengals don't win a playoff game, I'd want to see him go. I'd want to see him go somewhere where he could win. I mean, he might be past his prime at that point, but still.
He'll still,
sure he can help our team.
Oh yeah, he'll definitely be able to help a team, barring injury, of course. But we seem to have gotten off tangent here. We'll get back onto things here. Mike Evans, another tall receiver, kind of like AJ Green. Boy, I didn't even see the hit until a few days ago. That was vicious and certainly unwarranted. And it did, however, warrant a 1-game suspension. Correct?
Oh, yep.
What was
suspended one game?
What was the fine?
I honestly don't know. I didn't see the fine amount.
All right. Well, you want to describe the play, Austin, because I've only seen it a couple times.
Sure. I don't know what happened before the play, but I saw what happened. Marshawn Lattimore is walking away from the Buccaneers side of the field, and Jameis Winston pushes him. Marshawn Lattimore immediately turns around and gets into a scuffle with Winston. And obviously that's the Buccaneers quarterback, but he started it. It was Winston's fault that even happened in the first place. And then before he knew it, Mike Evans flew into him from his back as Lattimore was starting at Winston and just went for a nasty hit, like a back crack type of hit. So that's what I saw anyway.
Wow, that's not good at all. You hate to see things like that. I'm all for defending your quarterback. But
I wasn't. Winston started it. I thought he was being a little bit of a wuss for just because Lattimore wasn't in his face. He was walking away, and he pushed him as Lattimore was walking away.
Okay,
so,
yeah, I get that. But on the other hand, I know this wouldn't happen, but remember when Richard Seymour punched Ben Roethlisberger? Roethlisberger actually instigated that, I would say. The point being, the point I'm trying to make here is that, yes, he might have started it, but I'd still understand standing up for your quarterback because he's your quarterback. Whether or not it's right, you still stand up for him just because he is. But obviously he went way too far. There's no doubting that whatsoever. In any case, the Buccaneers are in bad shape right now, and they've lost Winston, and they won't have Mike Evans for the next game either. Moving on, Richard Sherman, as we discussed in our last episode, done for the year. The NFC West is down to 2 teams between the Seahawks and the Rams. So with this injury to the Seahawks, are the Rams the favorite to win the NFC West now?
I think they are, but I wouldn't count the Seahawks out. They could still find a way to beat the Rams out for the division. They verse each other again in Week 15, and the Seahawks win there. If they do, that could put them in a good chance to win the division when the Rams still have to play the Vikings and Eagles. It's going to be close. I hope the Rams win it, though. I've voiced my hatred for the Seahawks. What do you think? Is this the Rams' division to lose?
I think they're the favorite, but obviously you can't count out Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. They still have a very good defense without Richard Sherman, and there's still a lot of football left to be played. Yes, Jared Goff and the Rams have played much better than expected, but as you mentioned before, they have a tough schedule going forward. And you have to think a veteran defense is going to give Goff some problems. So I'll say advantage Rams, but it's not a very strong advantage. So I could definitely see either team winning. But conversely, should the Rams win the division, say they finish, what's their record now? 5-2, 6-2?
I think it's 6-2, but I'm not.
Check that for me, please.
Yep.
The Rams, say they finish 11-5, 10-6. I think they were 4-12 last year too. That's something if you could also check for me, Austin. I mean, just thinking about the single season turnaround where last year they were just kind of dead in the water, had the worst offense in the league by far. And then to all of a sudden become a playoff team, a potential division champion. Could we consider this maybe the biggest single season team turnaround in nearly 10 years? I'm thinking more specifically the 2007 and 8 Miami Dolphins, who went from 1-15 to 11-5 in the AFC East champions.
Well, I completely think that I think not because of record-wise, but because of their statistics, turning around from the 32nd ranked offense to the first ranked offense, that is the most amazing turnaround ever. And while maybe the record isn't as that great of a turnaround, it's still I think that the offensive change is more important. To be honest, they're doing everything they can to be better. I just think the NFL as a whole is better, is more close this year than it was last year. I felt like last year there's way more teams and such, and I'm struggling to find. I know the Rams are 6-2 this year. I'm struggling to find their last year record, which I thought was. I think they had 6 wins or finished that way, but I can't find it.
Okay, I actually think that might be no. It can't be the biggest turnaround, or is it? Let's think about this for a second. They improved 10 wins. Okay, no. It's not the biggest single season turnaround because I remember the Colts in Peyton Manning's first year went 3-13, and his second year they went 13-3. So it was one of the biggest turnarounds, but not the biggest. I definitely agree with you. Going from last to first, with granted the receiving core is different, but with the same quarterback and the same running back is pretty impressive. Now I know we probably thought that Todd Gurley was better than his performance last year showed, even though we probably thought, I don't know about, how did you think about Todd Gurley after last year? Did you think he was kind of the second-year player or the first-year player that was really dominant, or kind of in between? Because I thought he was kind of in between both.
I thought he was not that good last year, in honesty. I thought he was not doing too hot, especially I watched him a lot closely because he was on my fantasy team last year. That's how I really pay attention to players, and he wasn't doing as his first year is a sensation. He was amazing.
Oh yeah, what I'm asking is, like, he played really well his rookie year. Yeah, he played not very well his second year. Coming into this year, now that we had seen 2 years of him, did you see him more as someone who was worse, like not someone who, say he was more like the second year player he was, or more like the first year player? I kind of thought he was in between.
Oh, I thought he was going to be like the second-year player. I didn't think he was going to bounce back. I thought he was over. The Rams were 4-12 last year, by the way. I finally found it. It took a while, but I got it.
All right, that's what I thought they were. So yeah, record-wise, it wouldn't be a huge difference. It would still be big, but I'm figuring 10 or 11 wins is where they'll finish. But yeah, I think going back to what you were saying, finishing with the top-ranked offense, which is theoretically possible, but going from there after having the worst is just as impressive, if not more impressive in itself. So that's definitely something to admire. And then last but not least, we have one last bit of NFL news. Ezekiel Elliott's suspension is finally on. So now that it's Saturday, can we assume that it's not going to be overturned? And what does this mean for the Cowboys?
I think he's just trying to settle now, and he said he will settle for four games. So he will probably try to appeal it again or something. I don't know. I read an article saying that at this point he just wants the suspension lowered and that he'll settle for 4 games. So maybe he's going to ask again. Still, I honestly don't know. I'm confused.
Well,
I'm just waiting for it to end.
Why don't we just assume it's going to be 6 games for the sake of this? Where are the Cowboys going to be after this? And I'll bring up the Cowboys schedule right now, as a matter of fact, so we can kind of go game by game here. Zeke would come back with 2 games left in the Cowboys season. So right now that would leave. Right now the Cowboys are what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
They're 5-3.
Okay. So they would be at Atlanta this week, home against Philly, home against the LA Chargers, home against the Redskins. That's 3 straight home games. At the Giants, at the Raiders, home against the Seahawks, and then at Philly. So the last 2 games at Philly and home against Seattle is where he would come back.
I mean, I feel like the games he's going to be gone for aren't that bad. If he's gone this week against the Falcons, that should still be a win. Eagles, that's a rough one. That would have been nice to have him for. Against the Chargers, that's not bad. Against the Redskins, that's not bad. Against the Giants, that's super good. And then Raiders, it would help, but I mean, I think Alfred Morris and Rod Smith could get it done at the Raiders. So, and then you get them back for Seahawks and the Eagles for the second time. So the two hardest games at the end you have Zeke for. So I feel like they're okay. They're doing okay.
The other thing to consider is that the last game against Philly may not have any sort of importance.
That too. That's true. I don't know, but I feel like they'll probably be playing for a wild card spot at that point.
So it'll be important for them, but Philly will probably be playing their backups. Okay, we'll keep an eye on that situation for now. All right, moving forward to some Steelers news. Antonio Brown leads the NFL in receiving yards, and Le'Veon Bell is third in the league in rushing. Surprisingly enough, despite his up and down season, Ben Roethlisberger is ninth in passing yards. Is there a chance that all three of these guys finish in the top 10 and that Bell and Brown finish first?
There's no wide receiver quarterback duo that is capable of beating Brown and Roethlisberger. The one that had a chance was Watson and Hopkins, but as we know, that is now Savage Hopkins. And Brown should finish as the top receiver this year. That's easy. As for Bell, I think his chances are slightly lower since he had a rougher start, but with how much he's being fed and Kareem Hunt slowing down and on a bye week, and now Zeke maybe suspended 6 games. We'll see. We'll figure it out. This should be Bell's as well. Assuming Zeke actually serves his suspension, as I said, he will fall way out of the top 10 probably because 6 games is a lot of games. And right now, Bell is only 40 yards behind Kareem Hunt in rushing, while Hunt is on his bye week. And if Bell doesn't get 40 yards this week, something is wrong. Something is very wrong if Bell doesn't get 40 yards. As for Roethlisberger, it's hard to say. I want to say he will, but the team may rely heavily on the run for the second half, seeing as though Ben hasn't been the same, and Jared Goff and Phillip Rivers aren't far behind him on that list. My guess is he will end the year at 11, just outside, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him at like 10 or 9, just squeaking in there. What do you think?
I think that it's pretty easy to assume that Antonio Brown, if healthy, is probably going to be the NFL's leading receiver. I mean, look, he gets like 11 targets at minimum a game pretty much. And even though the Steelers are more of a running team now, he gets the ball. It's as simple as that. So I think that's where one you can wrap up. The rushing totals are a little different. As you mentioned, the complications with Elliott and his potential suspension still up in the air. Not sure how that's going to work out. Obviously, he won't be winning the rushing title if he's suspended. Kareem Hunt's a little more interesting. He's really not put up much yardage at all the last month plus of the season, and Bell's gained on him after his slow start. So it's kind of evened out a bit. Looking at the rest of the Steelers' schedule, they obviously have a pretty bad rushing defense coming up this week. I guess actually not terrible as far as statistics go. They're the 16th ranked rushing defense. They have Tennessee on Thursday night this week, who I believe they have a decent defense. Green Bay is not good. Cincinnati, who's okay, they're solid. You have to worry about Geno Atkins. There's Baltimore, who's actually near the bottom of the league. New England's defense hasn't been good. Houston is missing players, and then there's Cleveland. So I don't have a ton of faith, you know?
Yeah, I feel that.
So I feel like Bell has a pretty good chance to win it. And then lastly, Roethlisberger in the top 10 of passing. I think he can do it. There's obviously a lot of time to see if he's going to be able to return at least a little bit to form and get a little better. I don't know. Part of me thinks that he's going to play a lot better. Part of me thinks this is pretty much the way it's going to stay. If there is a chance he's going to get better, though, it's going to start with this game, obviously. The Steelers played a lot of good defenses over the first half, so that might have contributed to it. We'll see what the bye week has done for Ben Roethlisberger soon. Let's move on to the injury report for the Steelers. It's pretty short. It just starts with James Harrison, who was already ruled out with a back injury. So, I don't know. It's interesting, Austin. Have you seen his Instagram videos? I don't know if he's hurting, really.
It's weird because, yeah, he's working out still. He's just been – I was just confused as you were because I'm seeing that he's not practicing, but he's still working out like a madman. And, like, what?
I've heard a notion. I want to know if you've heard this before. He has, like, you know, some minor back ailment, but Mike Tomlin and the Steelers are using it to basically keep him out because they're not only not planning on using him, but they don't want to hear it from the media and the fans right now. So they're just, all right, we'll stash him away on the injury report and we'll rule him out for now, you know?
That's an interesting one. That's savage, first of all. But that'd be surprising, especially after they said that they wanted to get James Harrison more involved in the second half. So I hope that's not true.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe then again, maybe it is just the realities of being a 39-year-old linebacker in the NFL. I don't know. We'll see. The only other injured players that were on the report from the previous Steelers game, there was Vance McDonald, who has returned to practicing in full, Marcus Gilbert and Stephon Tuitt, whom I believe returned to full this week as well. And the only question mark besides that was Mike Mitchell, who injured his Achilles in the win over Detroit 2 weeks ago. He was a full participant in practice on Friday, so he is actually not even on the injury report, but obviously he's still banged up. For the Colts, they have John Simon, who's an outside linebacker, and former Ravens receiver Kamir Aiken out of this game. And they have cornerback Quincy Wilson with a knee and T.Y. Hilton, obviously the receiver, with a groin injury, who are questionable for Sunday's game. So, boy, you think T.Y. Hilton's going to play, right?
If he doesn't play, this game is actually, I guess, they might not only have like 2 yards. They're going to have 2 yards, and that's it.
This game could be over by the second quarter.
Yeah. Yep.
Speaking of things being over, the Steelers, we've acted pretty confident so far, but there's a lot of good reasons for it. And if you want to believe in history, that's just one of them. The overall history in this matchup, the Steelers have dominated. Austin was kind to find out. This is the Steelers. The Steelers have the 5th best record against the Colts as they do any other opponent. And it's interesting to note that because 3 of the top 5 teams are NFC teams, so the Steelers don't play them much. With a .793 winning percentage, the Steelers hold an overall record advantage of 23-6 over the Colts. With a win, it would tie their percentages against the Jets and Buccaneers at .800 for the 3rd best record against any opponent. The Steelers have won 4 straight games in this matchup, the last being the 28-7 win on Thanksgiving last year. For those of you who remember, Antonio Brown caught 3 touchdown passes. Lovely Thanksgiving, one of the best I've ever had, for sure. It was also the Steelers' first ever win on Thanksgiving, fun fact. The last Indianapolis Colts win came in week 10 of 2008. I remember that. I actually watched that game live. I remember it too. Ben Roethlisberger was in a 2-week stretch of probably one of the worst in his career. He threw 7 interceptions and 0 touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, where the Steelers lost 2 straight games to a Manning. First in Eli, and then the second week in Peyton Manning. The Steelers held a slim 20-17 lead late, then left Dominic Rhodes completely wide open on a flare route, and he went in for the winning touchdown. But it's been almost 10 years since the Colts beat the Steelers. In the current playoff record, the Steelers are 5-0 with their most notable win coming in the AFC Championship game in 1996 and defeating the Colts most recently in the 2006 playoffs for the 2005 season, upsetting Peyton Manning, where Roethlisberger quite famously had a shoestring tackle that saved Jerome Bettis' legacy, if you will, as the Steelers went on to win the Super Bowl. Here's another fun fact. Of the 6 losses to the Colts, 3 of them came in the first 8 matchups where the Colts were in Baltimore. So that being said, the last time the Steelers lost to the Colts before the Roethlisberger era, 2 losses in that era so far to the Indy Colts. The year was 1984. That was the last Steelers loss before the Roethlisberger era. So to give you some perspective, that means Mike Tomlin has lost to the Colts once, and Bill Cowher lost to the Colts once in his entire career. Give you some perspective. I don't know if that interested you at all, Austin, but going off on that. Yeah, I know the Steelers have been owning them lately, but they've never beaten the Steelers.
Poor Colts, man.
Yeah, it sucks for them.
They're just trying to survive.
Yeah, I know, and it's not going to get any easier this week. Moving on from that now, boy, here's another interesting stat talking about the Colts defense. The Colts have 0 remaining starters on defense from opening day in 2016. So a little over a calendar year ago, they had 11 different starters on defense. That's an awful lot of turnover on a team, let alone the starting defense. And you know what makes it even worse? The defense last year was bad, and this unit is even worse. They've given up less than 20 points this season only twice, or in a game twice this year. Once was in week 2 against the Cardinals, right after they lost David Johnson, and last week when they played Tom Savage and the Texans. That's not impressive whatsoever. So all that being said, Austin, what does the Steelers offense have to look forward to? Like, is there a specific weak point? Like, it's got to be like Christmas Day. Christmas is coming early, right?
The weak point is everywhere. Just hit it. Just do something. You don't. There's no way to mess up basically here. You pick one where you want to attack and you do it. But that stat that you just said that they don't have a single person starting on defense that they did last year. I hadn't heard that stat, and that's insane. But if the offense manages to blow this game somehow, I may just commit to being solely a hockey fan and never watch football again, because I might really be that upset. Because this is about as favorable as it gets for the offense. The Colts rank dead last in points given up per game, 31st in total yards allowed per game, 31st for passing yards allowed, 16th for rushing yards allowed, then only have 18 sacks, which is tied for the 18th in the league. These were the stats with Vontae Davis, who they now have cut, but would have been injured for this game anyway had they not. So, Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Martavis Bryant should have an amazing time here. The Colts secondary is one of the worst in the league, if not the worst. They don't even have their first-round rookie Malik Hooker anymore for this game. There is no one left on this defense that can stop anyone. Specifically, Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger over the last few innings have had a really great game against the Colts. In the last 3 games against them, Ben has thrown for 1,107 yards, a 72% completion percentage, 13 touchdowns, and an amazing 0 interceptions. Then Antonio Brown has had 23 receptions for 342 yards and 7 touchdowns, as well as a punt return touchdown back in 2015. They've literally ruined the Colts the past 3 times. They're just the stars. Another eye-popping stat that I actually didn't realize is that in the past 3 meetings, the offensive line hasn't given up a single sack in any of those games. And if anything, this offensive line is the best of anyone that they've had facing the Colts in the past 3 years. So that just looks positively as well. Also, traditionally, other wide receivers step up in the game against the Colts, specifically with several different players contributing. So expect Martavis Bryant to have a good bounce-back game here. It's a good game for him to come back and get back into his offensive role. And Juju Smith-Schuster as well to eat. Then Bell should continue being a monster because, again, the Colts defense is putrid, and the Steelers offense should be able to do whatever they want here. It should be whatever they feel like doing, it's going to happen. There should almost be no fight from the Colts. The one spot, the one guy that they have is Jabal Sheard, and that's it. There's no one else. And Jabal Sheard has only been really good over the past, 2 or 3 weeks or so. So there's really no one else.
He's almost like more of a rotational player than he is a starter too. I'm sorry, but
yeah, exactly. It's bad. They're bad, and they should feel bad. Do you have anything to add about the offense?
Yeah. No, I think you covered it pretty much. So I'll kind of just almost be restating what you said. But look, when you're game planning for this, you don't really need to beat yourself up about it. You just play your game. Run the ball with Bell. That's what I expect. If the Colts load up the box, throw it to your guys on the outside, Brown and Bryant. If they start cheating that way, hit them on the inside with Smith-Schuster and maybe one of the tight ends. What happens if they shadow AB too much? Well, they're 31st in pass defense, so that means they can't cover well either. So I'd like to think the Steelers are going to have the advantage pretty much anywhere on this offense. And you already covered the offensive line. They've had 100 rushing yards, I believe, in every game against the Colts the last 3 years. The only one I'm not sure about is the first one in 2014 when Roethlisberger threw for 522. I think Bell had 92 yards in that game. So it's not like they were struggling to run the ball either. D'Angelo Williams had 100-plus in 2015, and obviously Bell went for over 100 last year too. So the Steelers should be able to run the ball too. Listen to some of these defensive starters. At nose tackle, Al Woods. I don't know if you remember him, Austin, but he barely made the Steelers roster in 2013 when guys like Ziggy Hood and Cam Thomas were ahead of him. Do you remember him?
I don't.
Well, the only other players I can honestly say I recognize are safety Darius Butler, whom I never thought to be that good, Jonathan Hankins, who's starting at defensive end, who's actually supposed to be a nose tackle, and Jabal Sheard, who we already talked about. He has 4.5 sacks, but if he's the only one you're worrying about, that's not a big deal. This isn't J.J. Watt. It's someone who's a third the kind of player that he is, so you should be in good shape. So, I mean, I know the Steelers are going to have a chance to probably make their mistakes in the red zone and on third down, but I think if there's a game that they're going to get back on track, this is the one. I expect a big bounce-back game for all those involved, and I think this could be the best offensive game we see from the Steelers all year long. On the other side, this is the fourth straight year the Steelers have faced the Colts. It's the fourth different quarterback they're facing. They got Andrew Luck in 2014, and as has been the story with his career ever since that great season in 2014, he has been injured. Matt Hasselbeck in 2015, the Steelers saw. They saw Scott Tolzien, and tomorrow they're going to be seeing the person starting in front of Tolzien and Jacoby Brissett. Does he or the Colts offense inspire any fear in you or the Steelers, or should they?
Well, the Colts offense is better than their defense. That's something, I suppose. I mean, it's kind of hard to be worse than what's already the worst in the league, but still, it's not even by much. The Colts have arguably the worst offensive line in the league. They've given up the most sacks at 36. And surprisingly, while giving up the most sacks, I thought that was weird. They haven't given up the most quarterback hits. I don't know if that's normal. They haven't even given up the second most. I just thought that's weird. So when they let people by, Jacoby Brissett just keeps holding on to it. I don't know. I thought that was weird. But anyway, giving Jacoby Brissett no time to let plays develop is one of the reasons why the offensive line is also terrible. And not really opening up holes for Frank Gore and Marlon Mack to run through. They're just bad. They're really, really bad as a whole. The Steelers' defense should really eat here, especially the pass rushers. This has potential to be a bloodbath. They face the Rams, who currently rank 6th in the league for sacks with 26, and in their game, Colts gave up 4 sacks. And when they played the Jaguars, who have the most sacks in the league, they gave up 10 to them. Steelers lie in between those teams. They have 1 more sack than the Rams do. So don't be surprised if the Steelers get upwards of 5 sacks here. Then there's literally only 2 people to watch out for on this entire offense. And that's Jack Doyle, their tight end, who's been up and down, but when he's up, he's really up. And then number 2, T.Y. Hilton. And basically, if T.Y. Hilton is shut down, they won't be doing anything this game because their run game is nothing to write home about. And this team has no other star power. This may be the worst game of the year for the Colts. I won't be surprised if this is absolutely a murder on TV. What do you have to say about the defense? I mean, the defense.
No, you're good. This all starts with the offensive line, in my opinion. And as you already touched on, the Colts have one of, if not the worst in the league. They've given up the most sacks, and with the Steelers' pretty good pass rush, even though they struggled a couple weeks ago, I think they could have a field day tomorrow. Jacoby Brissett is talented, and I'll give him this. He's played well, a lot better than I thought he was going to. I think he's proven that he has earned a spot in the NFL, but he doesn't have time to throw the ball, and he doesn't have help in the running game because the offensive line is so bad. Anthony Costanzo is the only player I recognize on the offensive line. I know they have another high draft pick from a couple years ago there, but Brissett is just getting battered all the time. And besides that, they have a pair of interesting running backs. You have Frank Gore, who kind of looks like a 34-year-old running back who's on the downside of his career. He hasn't been able to make much happen now that he's slowing down behind a bad offensive line. And Marlon Mack is a pretty talented player. We saw him in the preseason, but he has a fumbling problem and can't pass protect well, so he doesn't play as much as he probably should. The best part of this offense, in my opinion, comes with the pass catchers. There's Jack Doyle and T.Y. Hilton, as you mentioned. Doyle doesn't scare me that much because he's kind of like the Heath Miller at the end of his career, kind of like Jesse James is right now. Not a big yards after catch kind of guy. He's a security blanket. So as long as you don't let him get the first downs, you can take the underneath stuff with him. Moncrief can make plays, but he's a number 2 receiver, and he's not a great one. I'm worried about T.Y. Hilton, as you are, obviously, Austin. He's the biggest playmaker on this team, and he's kind of like the closest comparison to Antonio Brown at receiver that there is in the league. They're 2 small receivers, and they're both dynamic. Although, obviously, Brown is better. Hilton is averaging over 20 yards a catch, so you can expect that the Steelers are going to be tested with the deep ball, and Hilton needs to be tackled immediately once he catches it because he's got the ability, as we saw last week, to take a quick pass all the way to the end zone. So doubling up is going to be the key, and I doubt if the Steelers are successful in doing this, the Colts are going to have luck, some luck, if any, scoring it on offense at all. It's going to be a tough game for them regardless. As far as the special teams go, there's not much to say for me, Austin. I know that on the other side, just another interesting thing to note, it's going to be a meeting between the oldest and youngest player in the NFL.
Yeah, honestly, Adam Vinatieri is. I don't know when he's going to retire. I'm confused. Like the man has been going since I was born. That's how old he is. He's been kicking the football since a year before I was born, and that's just crazy to think about. Like, I don't know. I feel he's got to be coming to an end of his career soon. No.
I would think pretty soon. Yeah, Vinatieri's first year in the NFL was he probably his first NFL game was probably a few weeks before I was born. Yeah, 1996 with the Patriots. Here's another interesting thing for perspective. His first Super Bowl was his rookie year. So that means the first Super Bowl he played in was Super Bowl 31. If that I don't know if that's kind of a wow factor for you.
That is, I feel so long ago. Like, what are we at right now? We're going into Super Bowl 51, right? 51?
52. 51 was last year.
All right, yeah. This is crazy. Like,
yep.
Like he's been through almost half the Super Bowls. That's an exaggeration. Obviously, it would have been from 25, but he's almost been through half of them.
Oh, this is his 22nd year, so he's getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And the other interesting thing to consider is he's still good. He's hit on almost 95% of his kicks this year.
That's insane.
Yep. And
that must have an insane diet like Tom Brady.
And on top of when he's going to retire, I tend to think he's going to retire probably in the next few years. And the reason being he's 44. He could do this for pretty much as long as he wants, but I think he's going for the all-time scoring record. Look, Vinatieri, in my opinion, is a Hall of Fame kicker. No one's made more clutch kicks in NFL history than he has. And he just passed Gary Anderson for second place all-time on the scoring list last week. And I already calculated this. It should take him he would need to average 12 points a game to get to the record this year. So I have a feeling sometime next season he'll pass Morton Anderson for all time, and then that'll probably be his last year. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely got the money for it. He's been playing for so long. He has to have the money.
Yep. Beyond that, this is a game in the Dome. It should be a good day for kickers. Hopefully Jordan Berry can improve on his game last time out. Are we going to see Eli Rogers return punts now? We still haven't seen him out there since he muffed that punt in Chicago.
Honestly, I have no idea. I honestly hope so. After, I feel like he needs another chance, man. I feel like that's just simple as that. Just let him have a chance. If he fumbles again, all right, you take him off and keep him off. But I don't see a reason to just not give him a chance when Antonio Brown's not doing anything out there either.
If he's active for these games, why not try it? That's how I see it. But in any case, we can move on to the keys of the game. What's one key for the Steelers' offense for success tomorrow?
Honestly, it's just attack everywhere. There shouldn't be a need to just force it to AB every play, even if he should be killing his man every play. Spread the ball and make them take coverage off of AB to open him up and make them respect the other receivers. Listen, there should be something open. There's almost no reason that any part of the offense should be shut down. But if it is, just to attack the other side, attack them with the run game, attack them by hitting Darius Hayward-Bay, like one of one of the deep receivers on the depth chart. Like, it doesn't have to go to Antonio Brown every play this game. He should actually have a relatively. I mean, I'm sure he's still going to get fed, but I feel like other receivers might eat here too, so it doesn't need to be forced to him. So, what is your offensive key?
It's kind of similar, but it's keep it simple. The Steelers have the advantage in every matchup here. We already talked about it. There's no reason to get cute, try trick plays, or too many misdirection plays to try to catch the Colts off guard with something exotic. Winning this game is as simple as beating the man across from you, and it's pretty clear that the Steelers have that advantage for pretty much every position. Throwing or running on offense should be easy, and on defense, just load up the box, make Jacoby Brissett beat you, and hopefully before long he'll have to try to play catch-up, and they won't have a chance with that horrible offensive line. It's going to be a feast. On the other side of the ball, Austin, what's the key for your key for the Steelers defense?
It's just not to let T.Y. Hilton get going. The defense has really only one star to defend on this entire offense. Just make sure he's kept locked down, and the Steelers will win this easily. I joked around they'll only get 2 yards. Honestly, if they don't let T.Y. Hilton get going at all, they might literally be under 150 yards passing. I'm not sure, but I'm sure Hilton will get at least a few catches, but still, I mean, like, really going. Do you have anything to add?
No, not really. Just that if you're going to choose Jack Doyle or T.Y. Hilton to cover Hilton more, because you can take those underneath routes with the tight end. You can take him getting 7-yard catches. You know, if he finishes with 12 catches for like 80 yards, you can live with that. So that's all I really have to say. And I'll jump right into the X factors here. Look, it's kind of hard to come up with an X factor when there are so many advantages, so I'll start with the guy who's been up and down all year. It's Ben Roethlisberger. It might be kind of silly, but he has struggled at times this season. He's played a big reason in why the offense is underachieved to this point. But with that being said, he has a chance to start turning his season around tomorrow. Now, I know a lot of people have been looking at his last 3 games against the Colts. I'll go back one more to his last 4 games, because he actually had a big game against the Colts in 2011. Not as far as touchdowns go, but he had a big yardage game. So, the last 4 games, Ben Roethlisberger has 1,471 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So, he's averaging over 3 touchdowns a game the last 4 games. He's averaging over 300 yards and only has the 1 interception, which came in a game in 2011. So, if Roethlisberger is going to get closer to the player that we thought he could be this year, it's going to start with this game. Who's your offensive X factor?
My offensive X factor is Villanueva. I sort of failed to really talk about Colts Jabal Sheard that much. I mentioned him at the end for a short bit, but like I said, he's been pretty good lately. He might be moving out of his rotational role and more as a starter, and he's on Villanueva's side, so he should be the only one that even has a decent matchup here, in my opinion. I'm still not worried. So that's just my X factor. Who's your defensive X factor?
It's Mike Mitchell. He's coming off that Achilles injury, and he wasn't great 2 weeks ago in Detroit. His performance tends to dip noticeably when he's hurt, especially with an Achilles injury because he's not that fast. I expect the Colts to try to take some deep shots, and you can expect Mitchell's going to be the one shadowing over the top on Hilton, so his performance is going to be big tomorrow. Who's your defensive X factor?
Mine's is Artie Burns. My guess is he will be predominantly on T.Y. Hilton, and as I've voiced several times, I'm not the biggest Artie Burns fan, so he's going to be the one to watch here for me. But let's move on to your bold predictions, man. What do you got?
All right. I know this is funny because we had looked at this kind of earlier, but we both have the same predictions as far as how many sacks the Steelers are going to get. We both had 6. I predict 1 from each of the defensive line members, Hayward, Tuitt, and Javon Hargrave, and I expect 1.5, so 3 in total are going to come from T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree. I think the front 7 feasts, and the Steelers aren't really going to need to blitz that much with such a bad offensive line. This might not be a bold prediction, but it hasn't happened all year, so I predict Brown and Bell go over 100 yards rushing and receiving, and Ben Roethlisberger goes over 300 through the air. And lastly, Martavis Bryant reaches the end zone for the first time since week 2 and catches a season-high 5 passes for 79 yards, the latter not being a season high. it is a bold prediction in my mind because he hasn't caught more than 3 passes in a game so far. His best game being the Week 2 game against the Vikings where he caught 3 for 91. What are your bold predictions for Sunday's game, Austin?
My first one is that Antonio Brown's stat line is going to be absolutely ridiculous, bringing in 9 passes for 284 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then, secondly, I'm going to mirror what you said originally. We both have the 6 sacks. My 6 sacks are going to 2 from Hayward, 1 from Watt, 1 from Dupree, 1 from Hilton, and then Shazier gets his first sack of the year. Then finally, my last one is the Colts get under 215 total yards of offense because I don't see them really moving the ball here. So let's move on to Pick'em.
All right. So it's time for our weekly Pick'em of our Pick'em section for the NFL slate of games, Week 10. Well, Thursday night we already talked about it, but the Cardinals were 6.5-point dogs at home, and the Seahawks did not cover as I predicted, thanks to a late garbage time touchdown. So Austin got another one on me there. We'll start with the Vikings at Redskins. The Redskins are 1.5-point underdogs at home. Kind of interesting at first, right?
Well, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I was going to say that was kind of interesting at first. I might have thought the Redskins would have been favored, but I don't know. Maybe this makes sense, doesn't it?
I think it made sense. I don't know. I think the Vikings are the better team, even with Case Keenum. They just activated Teddy Bridgewater. He's not starting this week, but Case Keenum is having a career year this year. He's actually doing decently, which is not normal for Case Keenum. So I have the Vikings covering. What do you got?
It's like Case Keenum has become the new Alex Smith. Wouldn't you say?
No. Oh, no, baby.
No?
No, he totally did. He's not throwing it far down the field. He's just throwing those easy 6-yard passes that it's working. That's basically the definition of Alex Smith up until this year. So
the ultimate game manager from 2008 to 2016. Let's put it that way. Yep. I also have the Vikings covering. Look, that defense is too good, and Kirk Cousins makes me nervous if I'm a Redskins fan, so I'll take the Vikings. Packers at Bears. What would it have taken? Say I would have told you at the beginning of the year that in this game the Bears would be favored by 5.5 points. Obviously, you'd say, well, Aaron Rodgers isn't playing, but what else would you have? You definitely would have said what else, though, right?
I would have said Jordy Nelson was out.
Fair enough. I could definitely see that. Mm-hmm. Well, Chicago's getting 5.5 points at home against the Packers, whose season is pretty much on the line right here. Is there any hope for the Packers?
I actually believe in them. I think the Packers are going to win outright and surprise the Bears. The Bears are better than expected this year, but I still feel like they're still a lowly Chicago Bears team, and they're going to blow an easy one against the lowly Packers without Aaron Rodgers. So Packers win outright. What do you got?
Until I see Brett Hundley throw successfully for an entire game, I'm not going to believe that they're going to win a game. That team is just too flawed behind him. So even though I don't think super highly of Chicago, and I think this is going to be a tough game, I still think the Bears win, but I'll take the Packers plus 5.5 for this one. LA is coming to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars, who are 4.5-point favorites. Kind of an interesting game. Austin, you want to talk a little bit about, even though the Chargers typically don't do well coming to the East Coast, that they've kind of had their way with this team.
Yeah, the Chargers, I was reading through tweets and just going through the comments of a tweet, and I saw something that was interesting. I saw a Jaguar fan say, oh, we're going to lose this anyway because Phillip Rivers always kills the Jaguars. And that it's just not a stat that I've ever really heard of or thought about. And I think he said the Chargers specifically, not just Phillip Rivers. But and with research, it's true. I thought it was just a guy exaggerating. Chargers have won the last 6 games of the series and have only lost to the 2 times to the Jaguars ever. And I think Phillip Rivers against them is 7-1. It's incredible. Like they ruined them like the Steelers ruined the Colts, except even worse. I think I'm pretty sure they had a better win percentage against the Jaguars than the Steelers do against the Colts. But so I'm picking the Chargers to win outright here, only because of that. They've won the last 6 in a row, and granted, the Jaguars have been pretty bad for a long time now, and that's contributed, but the Chargers haven't exactly been the scariest team in a while either. I think the last time that they were considered good was 2013 when they went into a playoff game and beat the Bengals and then went on to lose to the Broncos in the next round.
Yep.
But, like, that wasn't consistent. That was, like, 1 year. That was 1 year where they were good enough to make the playoffs. So, but anyway, I have the Chargers winning outright. What do you got for this?
I originally had the Jaguars covering, but they also originally had a 3.5-point line. Now that has changed to 4.5, and then the stat I'm seeing, I still think the Jaguars are the better team here, and I still think they're going to win, but I'll now take the Chargers plus 4.5. This is going to be a close game for sure. Jets and Buccaneers. The Bucs have been awful this year. They're 2-6, I believe. And the Jets, coming off that Thursday night win over Buffalo, they could get back to 500 at 5-5 at coming into Week 11, which I think nobody saw coming. But they're favored on the road, and I gotta be honest, I'm gonna take the Jets to cover here. I think the Bucs minus Mike Evans, minus Jameis Winston are just not a good team at all, and they weren't good anyways.
I think they're disrespecting the Jets here. I would have taken the Jets to cover if it was -6. I don't. The Buccaneers are awful. I was surprised to see this line that close, even though it's not at home. Just without Mike Evans, without Jameis Winston starting, it's the Ryan Fitzpatrick show again. Like, who's their number one receiver now? Deshaun Jackson?
Maybe, but you know what? Here's the other thing. I actually might think the Bucs might be better this year with Fitzpatrick, as odd as that sounds.
Maybe, but without Mike Evans?
No.
Like, okay, with Mike Evans, it's really not hard to be good because one of Mike Evans' best traits is that you throw it up and he has a good chance of bringing it down in a contested catch. But, like, without him, it's like you don't have a receiver, a big body receiver that can do that anymore. Your best receiver now is probably Deshaun Jackson. If not, your probably best target is Cameron Brate or
O.J. Howard.
What?
O.J. Howard.
You think so? I almost like Brate better. O.J. Howard fumbled last week, if I'm remembering correctly, and I don't know. Brate's been fantastic, but
they're all bad.
Yeah, they're bad. And then not only that, the Buccaneers' defense is awful. They're really, really bad, and it's almost unwarranted. Like, I don't understand what happened there. So Jets cover, but I think they disrespected the Jets here. I would have taken it as far as if the Jets were -6.5, I would have taken them to cover.
Blowout's coming.
Yep. Oh, man.
Speaking of blowouts, the Lions are 10.5 point favorites facing the Cleveland Browns. Oh boy. I know the Browns are coming off a bye, Austin, but I'm going to take the Lions to cover.
I think that's a smart choice, but I'm not smart, so I'm picking the Browns plus 10.5.
Well, you have the better record than I do so far, I believe, so we'll see.
By 1 game.
Well, still bragging rights, I suppose. Not much to say about that game, other than if Will Lester, it will be very, I don't know, he might not watch football the rest of the year if the Lions lose that game. Bengals at Titans. I almost forgot about this game. The Titans get a chance to beat another AFC North team. Well, they get actually 3 in a row because they get Pittsburgh on Thursday night next week. I'll be watching them a little bit for sure. Titans are 4.5 point favorites facing the Bengals, who are coming in on the road after that loss to the Jaguars. There's no way the Bengals win this game, and I know they're out of it really, but they're definitely out of it for sure if they lose this game. This is the last game they could lose.
Yep, the Titans are covering here. It's in my mind. We made our picks last week before we found out, or at least I did, before we found out Leonard Fournette was out, and I still, even afterwards, I was like, you know what? I like it that way. I think the Jaguars will still cover. And you know what they did? They covered without Leonard Fournette, and they ruined the Bengals. The Bengals didn't even stand a chance. And to me, they almost let the Colts win, the Bengals. So the Bengals aren't good. The Titans aren't really that great either, but they're way better than the Bengals. So the Bengals are awful. So the Titans cover here quite easily in my mind. What about you?
Yeah, I got the Titans covering. I don't really have anything else to add to that, honestly. So, last 1 o'clock game that we'll get to before the Steelers game. Saints at Bills. This is an interesting game for sure. The Saints are getting 3 points on the road in Buffalo, where it's going to be cold, and I think that favors Buffalo. The Bills have not lost at home this season, and even though the matchup might not favor them, I think the Buffalo weather is going to be too much for that soft dome team from New Orleans. So I'll take the Bills to win outright here.
I'm going to pick the Saints to cover. Honestly, I might regret that because I'm thinking about Kelvin Benjamin here and the Bills finally getting that number one receiver. But they also only, if I remember correctly, I read an article. I think they only have 2 active wide receivers for this game. I'm pretty sure it's just Jordan Matthews and Kelvin Benjamin. I think that's it. I think everyone else is hurt.
They don't have Zay Jones. They have, I forget his name. I think it's Thompson, and they're also getting Charles Clay back.
Okay, I thought Thompson was hurt too. I guess I missed him, but Charles Clay's playing. He was limited in practice all week.
I heard he's playing, but maybe he isn't. But I heard that he's expected to play.
Okay, so all right, I might eat it, but I'm gonna stick with the Saints covering here.
That's fair. I mean, yeah, we don't know for sure, so maybe that's something we can confirm. But we're not going to change our picks for that. Another potential blowout on our hands. We have the Texans at the Rams. Poor Texans fans without Deshaun Watson. The Rams are getting 11 points at home. Yeah, I'm sorry. I love Tom Savage, but he's not good. And I think the Rams cover here pretty easily. What about you?
I'm going to actually agree. I had the Texans plus 11 at first, but I think the Rams got to cover here because the Texans without Deshaun Watson is about the equivalent of the Giants right now. That's about as bad as they are, and the Rams just blew out the Giants. So, yeah, I'm going to have the Rams covered.
Speaking of those very same Giants, we'll come back to the Cowboys game in a moment. They're in San Francisco. One combined win, 1-16 is 1-15, 1-16. I can't remember exactly, but that's the combined record there. Oh boy, this is going to be an ugly game. But the Giants are getting 2.5-point favorites on the road. Could be the last start of the Eli Manning era in New York. If they lose, I think it is. If they win, maybe not. I think this is kind of important for Eli Manning and the Giants to win, and they're playing a bad team, so I think they win and cover, in my opinion.
I can't believe this wasn't flexed to Sunday Night Football. I actually am going to take the 49ers to win outright. I'm kind of hoping they start Garoppolo. I don't think they are. I think they would have announced that already, but I kind of, maybe halfway through the game, they're like, you know what? It's Garoppolo time. And they put him in when they're down, and Garoppolo leads the 49ers back to a comeback win in a really crappy game. But I'm just kind of hoping for something out of this game, to be honest. It's going to be a bad game that no one wants to watch. But 49ers win outright.
All right. Cowboys at Falcons. Ezekiel Elliott will not be playing unless we hear something different in the next 16 hours. So the Falcons are 3-point favorites at home. I'm taking the Cowboys to cover. I don't think highly of the Falcons at all anymore. They're done. They are so done.
Yep. This is the second week in a row that it's a surprise Atlanta favor because they were favored against the Panthers too, and that felt weird. But yeah, the Cowboys went outright, and I might have been wrong about the Cowboys. I thought they were worse than they are. They're still not that great, but they're better than Atlanta. So Cowboys went outright.
I think they're finally starting to get to that equilibrium where we thought they were going to be. They're not as bad. They aren't as bad as they were early in the year, and they aren't as good as they were last year because they overachieved last year. But I think they're finally starting to equal out to where they should be.
Yep.
Sunday night game. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. I think that makes sense.
All right, Sunday night. Patriots at Broncos. Patriots are 7.5-point favorites. Interesting to note, though, Brock Osweiler beat the Patriots 2 years ago, and they won that game in Denver, where this game is, on a 50-yard run by C.J. Anderson in overtime, I believe. So, all that being said, a lot of people think this is going to be a blowout. It's tough to win in Denver, man. I'll take the Patriots to win, but that's a huge line in Denver. So give me the Broncos plus 7.5. What about you, Austin?
Because I'm stupid, I'm going with the Broncos to win outright. It's just, traditionally, if this was in New England, I would have picked New England to cover 12 points. But the Patriots coming into Denver is just never been good for the Patriots. The Patriots only have a losing record against any team in one place, and that's Denver. It's the only place to have a losing record. So if there's any place to lose, if there's any place for Tom Brady to struggle, which he normally does, it's here. So I'm picking the Broncos to win outright. And I'm going to watch as the Patriots just absolutely have their way with the Broncos and be like, I'm stupid. I should have just picked what's happening. But
obviously, Steeler fans and even myself will be rooting for that too, as the Steelers hopefully get to gain some ground. Last thing, I think it's really the Steelers and Patriots at the top of the AFC, then the Chiefs, and then everyone else pretty much, right?
Honestly, I'm starting to doubt the Chiefs.
But I'm not grouping them with the Steelers and Patriots. I mean, Steelers and Patriots are top tier, Chiefs are tier 2, and then tier 3 is everyone else.
Pretty much, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep, it's really a top-heavy conference. I thought this would be the deeper conference, but it's actually the more top-heavy one. So, last game, Dolphins at Panthers. Panthers are getting 9 points at home, which I kind of thought was a lot, but maybe it isn't.
Yeah, I think the Panthers are going to cover here. The Dolphins, they let the Ravens put up 40 on them, and they put up 0. And the Panthers' defense, I believe, are now ranked the number 1 in total defense. So I don't have hopes for the Dolphins to do anything here. They don't even have Jay Ajayi no more. I mean, Kenyon Drake and Damian Williams did actually pretty good last game, but I don't know. I think they're worse than Jay Ajayi combined, so I have the Panthers covering. What do you got here?
This game is going to be closer because of Cam Newton, and not in a good way. He has more interceptions than touchdowns. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't. That's awful.
Yeah, so I don't think the Dolphins may not score a touchdown, but I think enough turnovers will give them enough chances to make it close. So I'll take the Dolphins +9 to wrap up here. And lastly, Steelers at Colts. The game 1:00 is it still Lucas Oil Stadium?
Yes.
All right. Steelers are getting 10 points on the road. Austin, it's kind of funny. We talked about this already, but we already know what the final score predictions are, but we both predicted the same sort of scenario. I had the Steelers covering easily by winning 34-0. I know the situation is set up so that the Steelers, it's a classic trap game, but I mean, the Steelers own this team. They always have, and I think they will continue to do so. I think everyone has a fantastic day. Maybe those crazy yardage numbers, those 9 catches for 284 yards you're talking about, Austin, maybe that happens, but also maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe all the backups are in by the start of the fourth quarter. You know, it could be that kind of game. So I think the Steelers have way too much on offense, and the Colts are going to have nothing on their side of the ball. So I think this is a pretty convincing and easily the best game of the year for the Steelers. What about you?
I also have the Steelers pitching a shutout. There's nothing on this Colts team. This team should be throttled by the Steelers. It should be over. And the trend over the past 3 years has for the Colts score less, going from 34 to 10-7, and for the Steelers to also score less, going from 51 to 45 to 28. So it made sense. I was either picking 3 or 0. I ultimately went with the shutout, and then I wanted the Steelers to get 30 points here, but to follow the trend, it made them have 1 point less than they did in the last game. So 27-0, Steelers cover quite easily.
Alrighty. Austin, is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap things up? Because I think we're all set.
Yep, just one thing. Actually, 2, I'm sorry. Firstly, at the moment, our records are 58-67 for John and 59 for 66 in Pick'em for me. So we're really close still. And then secondly, guys, you know something? We still have a giveaway going all the way up until December 1st. It's going for 20 days. I'm going to finish the episode, every single episode, reminding you of it. Because you just got to enter. You could refer friends to get entries. You could follow us on Twitter, view our Instagram. It's really easy. It's free, and you could win a Ben Roethlisberger Funko Pop. So go check it out. The link is probably going to be in the description. It is in the other videos so far. And then also it's our pinned tweet on Twitter. So check us out on Twitter. It's on Facebook, and I think it's on Instagram as well. So just check it out, guys. It's free.
All right. Sounds good. Austin, thank you again for joining me. And are you going to be able to see this entire game, or do you work till 1:30?
I work till 2.
Well, hopefully it won't be well, actually, I don't know how you feel about it if you want to see competitive football, but maybe the game will be over by the time you get home. So
that'd be something else. I'd probably be bored, to be honest.
Alrighty. Let's see how it goes, but as from me and Austin, everyone, you all have a good night, Steeler Nation. And Austin, I will see you later.
See ya.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.